mean, whenever you're ready, I guess.
How do you want me to open the video? Like, hi, this is Caitlin with GHN. Today we're talking about APRs.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to give it a shot then. Hello, this is Caitlin Baer with Texas Homeless Network. I'm the Balance of State Continuum of Care Programs Coordinator, and today I'm going to walk you through how to understand your Annual Performance Report, or APR. An Annual Performance Report, or APR, is a report that's required by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, 90 days after the end of a COC grant term. Your APR is something that you run in your Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Bradshaw, but I really thought you knew. We've all been talking about it.
The purpose of the APR is to let HUD know how your grant did during the performance term. So the APR captures things like your client's demographic information, where they came from, where they exited to, and their income information over the course of the year that your program operated. It's important that HUD knows how the grant money that they gave you was used and what performance that they're getting for the money that they're investing in your program. For this reason, we want to make sure you understand what your APR says so that way you know what you're reporting to HUD, and that way you can keep track of your performance metrics from year to year, as well as spot any potential compliance issues.
I'm sure you've all heard the saying, there's a right way, a wrong way, and the Army way.
So now that you know how to run your APR, let's talk about how to read it. I know that reports can be a little scary or maybe a little boring because there are a lot of different numbers to look at, and it can be difficult to understand what they all mean. But we're going to try and take some of the fear out of that today, or maybe a little bit of the boredom out of that today. So you don't need to be a master statistician to be able to understand an APR or to be able to understand any data that pertains to your program. And this is because you have a really good internal feeling system of knowing whether or not numbers are right. Your gut. If you are looking at an income performance measure, for instance, and you know about half of your clients gained a job while they were in your program, and you see that your performance metrics says that only 2 or 3 of your clients gained income through employment, you know you can do that gut check and be able to correct that because you have knowledge of your program outside of this report. One of the main problems we see with APRs is that data doesn't get entered correctly, or data is entered in the wrong spot, so your program doesn't get credit for all the amazing work that you're doing. I'm going to highlight some of those issues for you today so that way you can keep an eye on them in future and be able to correct them as they happen rather than after they're submitted to HUD.
I think the most immediate and the most drastic need in this territory, especially in this county, is housing.
The APR we're going to go through today is APR version 5.1, which is the newest version of the APR that exists, but is different from the more recent one that our recipients might be used to, which is version 5.0. Version 5.1 is different in that it comes out as a series of CSV files instead of as a pretty PDF, so you have to upload it into Sage in order to format it. The question numbers are also a little different on this version of the APR. Let's start with question 5A, the report validations table. The validations table shows you the breakdown of the people who are enrolled in your program. At the top, you'll see total number of persons served. This is the total number of persons that your project served over the reporting period that you selected for the APR. Underneath that, you'll see the number of adults and the number of children, which the previous APR didn't have. And then down towards the bottom, you'll see a lot of different categories that the previous APR didn't have, such as a number of veterans, chronically homeless persons, youth under age 25, parenting youth under age 25 with children, number of adult heads of household, and number of children in unknown age head of households. That number should always be 0 if you are inputting your data correctly, meaning that everyone that you enroll has a birth date. or an approximate birth date if the actual birth date is unknown. In the old APR, data quality was entirely under question 7. In the new APR, they break up data quality into categories. First, we have question 6A, data quality, personally identifying information. This is that information that identifies a person, like their name, their social security number, date of birth, race, ethnicity, and gender. While we would really like to have all of these data elements, and they'll be important for you to be able to distinguish between your clients, these are data elements that HUD is less concerned with their completeness. Question 6B is data quality universal data elements. These are those data elements that must be present, so as little data should be missing as possible. You can see both the error count in the first column and the percent of error rate. Keep these as close to 0 as you can. There are also a few new data quality elements in APR version 5.1, like question 6D, data quality on chronic homelessness. In this APR, it's clearly listed, which is helpful to make sure that permanent supportive housing projects comply. Another new data element is question 6E, data quality timeliness. In the HMIS policies and procedures, as well as the HMIS user agreement, users agree to input data. This measure shows us how long it takes users to enroll a client in a program after collecting the initial information. This means that our data will be both timely and accurate, so that way people who are using your data to make decisions can have as close to real-time data as possible. Question 6F is the last new data quality question. It lists inactive records for street outreach and emergency shelter. This question isn't applicable for COC program-funded projects, so we're going to skip it in this video. I'm also going to skip question 9A, 9B. Those are for street outreach. And because the COC program can't fund street outreach, we won't be covering this section. I'm also going to skip the demographic information like gender, race, and ethnicity, as these are mostly self-explanatory, and this HMIS video is to demonstrate how to read your APR for performance and compliance purposes. So as long as no data is missing in this section, you're probably good to go.
It seems to me that this is what we've got to do. Any county that is really interested has got to bring together a good, strong basis of public support.
Question 7A is about the number of persons served, and it breaks it down between adults and children. It's important that you always enter a client's birth date so that way HMIS can tell whether someone is an adult or a child when they enroll in your project. Question 7B is point in time count of persons on the last Wednesday of each of the months listed. This helps us with calculating your bed and unit utilization, which demonstrates community need to the COC and to HUD. Question 8A is households served. It's important that your households served matches your COC program application and grant for compliance purposes. You aren't allowed to serve less clients than you enter into your project application, but you are allowed to serve more. It's important to make sure that these numbers are at least equal, so that way if you're ever monitored by HUD, you'll be safe. The next section of questions that we'll cover is 13A1, 13A2, 13B1, 13B2, 13C1, and 13C2. If you are a permanent supportive housing project, it's important that each head of household that enters your project has a disability, as that's one of the eligibility criteria in the COC interim rule. If you run a permanent supportive housing project that also serves households with children, it's okay if some of the children don't have disabilities. It's just important that the head of household enters with a disability. Unlike the old APR, where they only asked if a client had ever experienced domestic violence and didn't ask if a person was actively fleeing domestic violence, the new APR splits those questions into two. So question 14A1 is about a client's history of domestic violence, and question 14B is about persons fleeing domestic violence. I like that they break them up here because someone with a history of domestic violence isn't necessarily fleeing when they enter your project. This makes it easier for our domestic violence providers who can upload their Osnium APR into Sage and get the same report. It makes it easier for them to determine whether a client was eligible when they entered their project. Question 15 is perhaps one of the most important questions on the APR for compliance purposes. This is because in the COC interim rule, there's only one criteria for eligibility, and that's that a client meets with the Hearth Act definition of homeless. If a client doesn't enter from either a homeless situation or from actively fleeing domestic violence, it could be that that client is ineligible, and the program could be responsible for repaying those funds to HUD. It's important, therefore, that all clients enter from homeless situations, or if they enter from other locations, that the program can prove the client is actively fleeing domestic violence. In some cases, you'll have clients that appear in the institutional settings category, and that can be okay too, as long as the program has on file that the client was homeless when they entered the institutional setting, and that the client remained in the institutional setting for less than 90 days. Now let's move on to our income metrics. Question 16 is for cash income ranges at entry, at annual assessment, and at exit, for those who exited the project during the reporting period. For compliance purposes, the most important row in this table is the second to last row, number of adult stayers without required annual assessment. Annual assessments are required for every client that has remained in the project for at least a year. The annual assessment should capture any updates to the client's income. If a client is missing an annual assessment, it's possible that your program could be out of compliance with HUD regulations.
To tell you the truth, General, I'm more concerned than I like to admit. I'll do the operation, but in fairness, I think you should know that I can't guarantee the results.
Therefore, it's important to make sure that if a client stays in your project for at least a year, that you can capture their annual assessment and enter it timely in HMIS. The next income-related question is question 17, cash income sources. This shows any cash income sources that the client received at entry, at annual assessment, and at exit for those who left the project during the reporting period. This categorizes all the different cash income by source, so you know whether a client has employment, if they get SSI, SSDI, or some other form of cash assistance. Question 18 demonstrates client cash income category, so it lists the number of clients receiving different types of income. You can see if clients are only using earned income to support themselves, if they only have other cash income to support themselves, or if they get both, or if they have none. Question 19A1, 19A2, and 19A3 all describe the amount of difference in client income changes over the course of their participation in the project. We typically don't look at this for performance or compliance standards, but it can be interesting information for a project to look at. Question 20A, 20B, and 21 all detail the type of non-cash benefits that a client might receive. This includes things like SNAP, aka food stamps, WIC, or TANF. It also has a section for another source if there's another local source in your area that clients often use. Question 22A1 and 22B describe how long a client has remained in the project. For rapid rehousing projects, it's best if most clients remain in the project for 90 days or less, though of course it's okay to provide clients assistance in rapid rehousing for up to 2 years. For permanent supportive housing, it's best if clients stay in the project for a year or more. Although clients are welcome to enter and exit as they please, it demonstrates that the project is high performing when clients stay in the project for a longer length of time. Note that if you are not a permanent supportive housing project and the HMIS team sees a lot of clients in the more than 1,825 day row, that they may contact you and ask if you made sure to exit all clients whenever they actually exited the project. Questions 23A and 23B are the most important questions in terms of performance, as the most important way that we can determine if your project is successful is if it exits people to permanent housing destinations on a regular basis. Of course, we don't expect 100% of clients to exit to permanent housing destinations, as we know life happens, but the majority of clients should exit to permanent housing destinations. I think that's probably all I need to say about that. Now I'm going to address other. If at all possible, please don't select other for questions 23A or 23B, as it's not descriptive enough, and it doesn't give you credit for if that location was permanent. There are very few exit destinations that would qualify under other. As you can see on both 23A and 23B, it's quite a comprehensive list, so it's unlikely that there are going to be many clients that would exit to an other destination. Something that HUD added in this new version of the APR is the ability to see demographic information of different subpopulations, so that way if your project is focusing on a specific subpopulation, specifically with veterans, people experiencing chronic homelessness, and youth, you can see the breakdown of data. You couldn't do this before, so it's very exciting. Question 25A through 25I all deal with veteran data. Question 26A through 26H describes the data of people experiencing chronic homelessness. Questions 27A through 27F describe the data that applies to youth. So there it is, a brief overview of performance and compliance issues in your HUD COC program APR. We hope you found this video to be helpful, and if you're still scratching your head or having trouble understanding your APR after this, feel free to reach out to Texas Homeless Network staff. And I'm assuming we can pop that up.
Yes.
Woo!
Sweet. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, that was better than the first time I explained it. Alright, I think I'm happy now.
Sweet. Thank you.
No, thank you. This is fun. I like doing voice acting stuff. It makes me feel happy.